Hotep, I'm Dr. Gloria Lattimore Peace, host and producer of OmniU Presents the H3O Art of Life show. The title of this show is The Philosophy of Maat, but the title of this show really should reflect the intent, which is to talk about the love of wisdom and the love of truth among African people, and to pursue that in a conversation that gives us some of the ways in which we look at the world and see ourselves in it and behave in it. So having said that, I will also confess that I have two guests with me today that know far more about what I'm talking about than what I'm talking about. So I don't think I'm going to do much talking on this show except to introduce them, and they are Professor Hunter Havlin Adams III, who is president of the Royal Circle Foundation, and Wani Sebamurti Gentry, who is the co-founder and president of the SIA Foundation. I first need to know something about these responsibilities that you have taken on in these foundations, because obviously the mission of these foundations is to pursue wisdom and truth and to disseminate it. Am I right about that, Hunter? Is that what the Royal
absolutely.
Circle does?
The Royal Circle Foundation, I'm one of the co-founders. Nana Dr. Patricia Newton, psychiatrist, CEO of the Black Psychiatrists of America and the Chief Medical Director of the Black Psychiatrists of America. We started this organization for the explicit purpose of finding ways to use culture, African culture, in the upliftment and mental health improvement of people in our communities. And so we have done lectures, seminars, we've done retreats in Jamaica and the Virgin Islands. We've advocated for the restoration of stolen works of art, so-called art, from the African continent, now lodged in European museums, to have those returned. Every other year, a major event is a forum on the state of Black mental health on Capitol Hill, which is co-sponsored by Black Psychiatrists of America and Representative Elijah Cummings of Baltimore. And so that's every other year. So we look forward to doing that next year. And anyone who wants more information can go to our website.
Which you cannot say.
I can't say.
Okay, but if they
you can look up
me,
Royal
I
Circle
will
and
put
you
you
can
in touch.
Foundation, and you can get more information.
Okay. And I need to know about SIA Foundation, Sebamurti.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Peace, for having me as your guest. It's always a pleasure. Always happy to see you and be here to dialogue with you. And we have a special treat here with Brother Hunter Havlin Adams III. It's an honor to be with you also. Yes, the SIA Foundation, SIA is actually an acronym for Seba M. Ankh Foundation. And those are Kemetic terms, which means teaching the way of eternal life. So our intention, I'm the co-founder, my wife Donna Camila Gentry, the other founder. Our intention is to help in the preservation and the dissemination of the ancient and modern wisdom teachings on the way of eternal life and peace and happiness. And we assemble and have group dialogues, which we call satsang. And periodically, I will have workshops to try to go further into particular topics to help people get a more broader comprehension of the essential things needed to find peace and happiness, which we feel exist inside oneself and not outside. It's not a commodity, it's an inward journey. And so we offer ways to try to help people to become more conscious in their lives so that they can live better lives.
Does philosophy apply in that context?
Yes, it does.
In what way?
In a way that philosophy, being that it is a love of wisdom, there's a philosophical understanding of pretty much everything that involves human endeavor to reach the highest heights of what is possible in terms of you becoming conscious and aware of your being. And so philosophically, as it relates to the wisdom teachings, there's much that's been given on the literature, in forms of literature on it. It's been codified. It's been methods of reaching these higher states of consciousness.
And Hunter, philosophy, how does that relate to what the Royal Circle Foundation endeavors to do? Does that come from your philosophy, the founding of this organization, because of your love of wisdom, because of your perspective, the way you see our people and our
Yes, and
our needs?
we have to be careful with the term philosophy because we tend to associate philosophy with Greeks and continuing on to the Enlightenment period in Europe. Of course, Dr. Theophile Obinga, one of the cohorts with Dr. Sheanta Diop from Senegal, contests the very notion of the origin of philosophy, beginning with the Greek miracle, as many of us have learned in our formal studies, and breaks down the word philosophy. And we find that the whole idea of this corpus of texts to guide a society to doing the right thing most of the time, and when folks don't do the right thing, how can there be justice to bring back that order and harmony? And so Dr. Obinga argues, I think quite rightly, that in that context, right, those teachings, those affirmations, those aphorisms, if you will, had their origin in Kemet, or pre-Greek and Arab Egypt. We have to make a distinction between the civilizations in the Nile River Valley before Greek and Arab and Roman occupation. That's when it became Egypt, but before that, it was the land of Ta-Seti, or the land of Meri, which loosely translated means the beloved land, which Dr. King talked about, right? He wanted to have a beloved land. He just didn't know that there was a beloved land that our people established. And so we need to think of the Kemetic term, which is Seba, which means teacher of the wisdom. And so Sebiyit would mean the overall corpus of that wisdom. And so that's a bit more specific than just the love of wisdom. You can love wisdom, but you've got to communicate that wisdom. You have to make it practical so people can use it in their own lives, right? That administrative officials who are running society, who are working on building projects, that they can use this wisdom in a practical way to ensure that things are done rightly and fairly for everyone. And then when people get out of line or go too far, you know, there has to be a system of reproach and redemption for them. These are the things that aren't talked too much about in Western philosophy, right? That this is not theoretical. You know, it's more than just a social theory. You know, it's no theory, because this was based on tens of thousands of years of practice on learning how to get along with people. Folks forget that you had 42 different ethnic groups in Kemet. And so they had to figure out a way of how can we all get along? How can we manage these resources that we have? The abundance of the Nile River Valley. You know, they love the watermelons. Some of the best watermelons in the world grow in the Nile Valley. Anyone who's been, they can tell you. I ate a whole one myself the first time I tried one, right? So the point is that their worldview had to be practical and useful in everyday life, not just a theory to be debated by other master teachers. So it's a different kind of thing. And so our foundation makes great effort to apply those types of teachings in the things that we do, because we're looking at what's the greatest benefit for the greatest number of people, right? You can't, you know, take mental health, for example. The way we think about
wait on mental health, because I gotta get over here to Sebamurti real fast.
Just one quick thing.
Go ahead.
And that is that it's individual based. We have to think of more community based. And so now that's becoming more and more of a reality.
Well, you made me have to go on a little over here footnote right quick before I come to Sebamurti, and that is when I spoke to Tahimba about the abhorrence of the Africans in Kenya, the Gikuyu, for the whole notion of individualism. That, you know, it was absurd and it was despised because individualism was an evil which perpetrated division in the whole which they understood themselves to be. It was a corruption of the whole. And so to treat mental health or any other kind of issue like that as though it is something that is only happening to this person.
Right.
You know, the opioid crisis, for example, that, you know, this individual is addicted, but this individual is addicted because the individual took it upon himself or herself to use illegal substances, or legal because they're often prescribed.
Right.
But the thing is that you treating this person as though this person is disconnected,
Separate, right.
is a separate entity. And so you're quite right. The Africans understood that I am because we are, and not
Ubuntu.
Yeah, right. So, but I was coming because I know that at the close of every satsang, we always say, may we always speak truth, do justice, and walk in the way of righteousness. Now, obviously, that is a philosophy. That is a philosophy that is meant to be expressed, not just recited. You know, like you just talk to us about why you even use that, why we invoke that as a part of what we practice.
Those are 3 of the 7 cardinal virtues of Maat: truth, justice, and righteousness. And I like to speak about that and mention it at the end of every satsang as a way of reminding us that our lives are not here for us to live it as we feel it, just to do whatever we feel on the moment we should do, or think that we can do whatever we want to do, that there are certain principles and guidelines which we are to adhere to if we want to have harmony, if we want to have peace. And we are to speak truth. We are to do justice. And we are to walk in the way of righteousness. And so those are 3 cardinal virtues of Maat, which is also a philosophical way of seeing the morality and ethics of a people living. In fact, it broadens out beyond that because it's cosmic related too. But earlier I was attempting to say how the theory relates to the Sebamurti understanding of disseminating and preserving the spiritual teachings. And I'd just like to speak a little bit more on it, just, because I like to go a little bit into the word theory. It shares a root word, theoria, where we get theatrical in theater. And fundamentally, it means a way to view. So theory is a way to view, and as used in the scientific community, it's a way of viewing events and phenomena to explain. But it's also a way of viewing systems of wisdom teachings that are to inform a practice. One of the things that you will find out when you study the ancient African, ancient Indian wisdom teachings, that there were several schools of thought that inform the practice. There were many different schools of thoughts that had to be understood in a comprehensive way before you engaged the practice. And one of the things I attempt to do when I share the wisdom teachings is to help elucidate what some of these schools of thoughts are in terms of their teachings and what they relate to in terms of our consciousness, and the means by which, primarily through meditation, that you enter into a practice so that you can make all of what you're doing manifest itself to you in an awakened sense. Because as Hunter said, there are so many different ways that we have become moved astray from the authentic and original way of understanding certain words that's being used now, that people are developing a wrong understanding because of it. And so that I think that in looking at theory in that sense, it helps you to see how you can't just stay theoretical and just viewing things as a spectacle, that you have to annex with that theory a practice. And then those two work together so that you can help to bring forth these latent abilities that you have in you, which of course we here in the West know very little about, because the purpose of educating and socializing people in the West is not to really come to know thyself and to know who you are as a conscious being. But so those three cardinal virtues of truth, justice, and Maat, they are to be practiced in your everyday living. We should speak truth, not bear false witness. And there's a tendency in the ordinary conscious mind to be manipulative and to not tell the truth because of that ego tendency is there, which is to always
Be
win
right.
at all costs, right? To be right. I have too much pride to admit that I have a fault or a shortcoming, or to speak the truth and be honest. That's making me look weak and vulnerable. So, but we are to speak truth because of many different reasons. The psycholinguistics of it all is very important, and to do justice, fairness, to give and receive properly in just ways.
Well, I know you're not speechless, Hunter, so come on.
Well, I just want to suggest to your viewers that there's a wonderful book called The Wisdom of Ptah-hotep, Spiritual Treasures from the Age of the Pyramids by Christian Jacques. It's the oldest book in the world. There's many different
Now you have to put it down.
renditions of this. Dr. Asa Hilliard has a version of this. But if you just search for The Wisdom of Ptah-hotep, it's an excellent resource into what Sebamurti just talked about on the things that a person is to do. How do you actuate speaking truth, doing righteousness, expressing wisdom, maintaining harmony and balance and order, right, showing compassion, not just to fellow human beings, but the entire universe, because we're part of everything, even a rock or a plant or anything, any other animals, because they saw no separation between themselves. And this is traditional people. Indigenous people still, maintain that to some degree, but when we're in urban environments like this city, we're estranged from the rest of the living world. We have little connection with it. How often do we see fireflies, for example, a few days in the spring, and that's it. But if you get out in nature, you'll see millions of fireflies. There was a song that Minnie Riperton did, only when I'm dreaming, and fireflies are bright as stars. But we don't even see the sky. You can't
see the stars in the sky at night.
You can't see them. We don't know what the darkness is, the beautiful darkness of the night sky, because we got all these lights. And that's why we have to return or redevelop, recultivate something similar to African traditional philosophies of life. Maat is one. There's a wonderful book by Anna Mancini on Maat. You can look that up.
But we can't read books on television. We have to talk on television about the principles of Maat. And
so
Sebamurti brought up
that.
three.
We take that,
What
the
about
whole notion
harmony
of compassion.
and balance?
Of compassion. That's one that many commentators, some of them are my colleagues and friends, overlook, is compassion. We see that in Buddhist philosophies, the whole notion of wisdom and compassion go together. You can't have one without the other, right. and if you don't, then that creates problems. So compassion is critical, because when you have compassion, it means you have a higher sense of empathy for other people, because there's no separation between you and them. Even your adversaries, they're in another box, but still you can have compassion. So compassion is really critical. And harmony, that's easy, because you talk about music. And in order to maintain societies, you take the Baka or the Aka people, pejoratively, or the Twa, known as, quote, pygmies, the little people. Harmony is so important to them. And so they sing harmony. Their harmony is so profound, Dr. Peace, that they can have a call and response between the insects in the rainforest just by singing. It's phenomenal when there's records, CDs, you can hear this for yourself. That's harmony. And it's that attitude that was present in most every African society, whether they're in the rainforest, in the mountains, in the desert, in the grassland. They had to be in harmony with that environment, with everything. So that notion existed before Maat existed. Maat is just a codification of practices that Africans had developed over 100,000 years or more. Even the notion of venerating the deceased, that's part of it, because that shows that there's a continuity of life before you and after you. So to find in South Africa, in this cave outside of Johannesburg, 12 skeletons, 300,000 years old, they were put there by the people. They had ritualized services for the deceased 300,000 years ago, Dr. Peace. So these practices and principles existed before the codification of them in Kemet, known as Maat, existed. So all of these things we talk about, operating society, your relationship with one another, particularly men and women. Women in Kemet, if they wanted to divorce a man because he got out of line, they could. They could. And then the brother had to pay her and her family. When did that happen in Greece?
That doesn't sound like harmony, though.
Well, it is to maintain the harmony, because the relationship is what mattered. And so the relationship extends, it's just different, but the relationship still goes on. Just because we can't get along, that doesn't mean that you're just out of my mind, out of my life. It doesn't work like that, because we're still part of one another. And so I'm saying that our ancestors found ways to maintain that. Even we still do it today. We don't recognize it, because unfortunately, it's those patterns and practices are put in this Western European box. And so we have to decolonize our experience to extract out the things that have been guiding us for more than 100,000 years. And so that's a challenge. So to develop and codify in this context, these old principles.
When you spoke of venerating the dead, I thought of the book of the Coming Forth by Day and by Night, the Book of the Dead.
But that book was for the living.
Yeah, but I understand that. But because it actually had the Maat, the principles, were part of that. But when I'm thinking of the dead, I'm thinking of not just the people who have made transition, but the fact that we do not think about our lives as having, our births as having a termination date or an expiration date. We don't think about the things that we are doing during our lives for which we will have to give account, the feather of Maat, after we have made the transition from this incarnation. Where are the instructions? Who is teaching us how to behave, what things to consider while we are in this vessel, so that when we are devoid of this vessel, our journey will be able to continue in a way that is in balance and harmony and all of the things that Maat teaches. What I'm saying is that this is not, we're not talking about a philosophy just so that you can be a nice person. Right. But you are also talking about life without end. We're talking about eternal. We're talking about being, continuing to be, and needing to learn how to be today, here and now, so that we can continue to be.
Right.
So the fact that both of you have foundations that are geared in that direction means that you know that this is important. Where else do you see this, the possibility of this being offered for people to discuss, you know, how then shall we live knowing that we will die is a book. Why are we not considering the philosophies by which we live, the manner?
Because we're in a matrix, a literal matrix. You know, we saw the movie The Matrix came out 20 years ago, 1999, May of 1999. And the Wachowskis told us then, in the first, I think the first one, Bane on the ship, the character Bane, he said, I'd rather live this life of illusion than be in the desert of the real. And so that's when he started killing people on the ship. And the sad fact is, most people would rather live a life of illusion rather than face the truth, as Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, the brilliant psychiatrist, told us that we need to face the truth. It's hard to live a life in that truth, that you want to come out of this illusion. This system is not going to get better for us. It was not for us in the first place. The Dred Scott decision, Judge Taney told us that this political apparatus was never intended to include us, even today. So we have to start thinking about what else do we do. We have to raise those questions, have a conversation about that.
But you can't perpetuate an illusion, because an illusion is elusive.
This one is self-perpetuating. All the factors of society perpetuate that illusion.
But reality asserts itself. Reality asserts itself however
we're
long.
seeing that now.
However long you want to pretend that what is not. Eventually, what is will be so blatantly is that it cannot be ignored. And that's a dilemma, because
Yes.
if some of us are operating in an illusion and others of us are not, then those of us who are operating in some kind of reality will have a lot of trouble trying to persuade those who are living in an illusion that that reality is real. In other words, you can't advise your children, you can't tell your neighbors, you can't. What you just said about the Dred Scott decision and all of that, the system does not get better. Do you know how many people will not believe you? Do
they
you
haven't
know?
read.
Do you?
It's not taught.
Reading is not necessarily going to be the answer. They can read and still decide
Absolutely.
that their experience denies the truth of that assertion. So we have, we have a situation in which Sebamurti and I have done a show called Freeing Yourself, in which it has to be your desire to free yourself from illusions that are absolutely against your best interest. Sebamurti, did you rescue me here?
And with our situation, those of us who have been acculturated, taken out of our culture in the sense of it being repressed, because our culture can never be taken from us, but it can be repressed to the point where we're not consciously aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
And for our situation is a freeing oneself on two levels of two illusions. It's a double. Because the wisdom teachings, as they were originally discovered, intentions were to inform people who already had a culture intact.
Right.
So they had all of the supports that were
Right.
necessary for them to ascend up to higher heights in terms of their conscious awareness and see reality as it is, merely to transcend the illusion of the false sense of self, which is popularly termed ego.
Ego, right.
So that was the only freeing that was needed to be the battle of freeing oneself from that illusion. But due to our unique experience of having been acculturated from our sense of culture, generations after generation now having been removed from it, we have in its place, as Dr. Amos Wilson so
Right.
wonderfully said, our consciousness has been falsified, and in its place we have an alter ego on top of the ego that exists, which must be freed from to be enlightened, to know thyself. We have to become free from this alien false sense of self that has been forced on us when we were taken out of a knowledge of our culture. So on two levels, we are battling hard to be free,
Mm-hmm.
which means we have to work extra hard to see reality as it is, which is impossible if you have been given a wrong sense of knowledge and identity that is alien and foreign to yourself without any of the supports, the cultural supports that's needed for you to see the higher reality. We can't even see the mundane because of our situation. It's been so false, and knowledge is a momentum. It is an activity. So it is not something that is just there for you to access when needed. It is operative.
It's not information.
It is not information, and it is constantly entering into perception and entering and meshing with your actions and everything that you do. So if you have wrong knowledge, you're going to have wrong behavior. And that wrong knowledge, of course, has come from you being wrongly educated. And so all of that is acting within our unique situation that has to be, first of all, the momentum of knowledge has to be disrupted.
Right.
So that movement has to be brought to a halt. And then it has to be deconstructed, whereas you have to now investigate and examine it and see to see the falseness of it. And in that whole process of doing that, that which is real will reveal itself. That hidden, repressed self that is still within you will now begin to show its head. So that's our situation is
that we're entangled in illusions.
Okay.
Double illusions.
Right.
And
we're entangled in
that's
them.
the matrix that you're referring to,
Right.
the illusions.
Right, although the movie only dealt with one illusion. It didn't deal with this other one that we contend with of, as Dr. Kobe Cabone say, a cultural misorientation.
Right.
Right, that we living with a misorientation of what culture, our culture, African culture is. And so we have been acculturated to assimilate into this American culture.
What American culture?
Which is really
well,
Into this
one that's been
American
constructed.
lifestyle.
It's been constructed. It's always being fine-tuned by how people respond to it to see, oh, well, we have to reconfigure it.
that's because it's an illusion. There's no such thing as American culture.
No.
There's just many different ethnic groups living
Right,
in America,
living together.
expressing themselves out of their culture.
But in service to white nationalism, to maintain that status, that's the overarching, quote,
Right.
American culture, right? But you have all these various ethnic groups that maintain their ethnic identity, have their ethnic festivals. Oktoberfest is coming up, and so Germans will be at the pubs drinking beer and everything, but everyone's invited, including the Irish, for example, because that allows for the expression of individual cultures. There was the Puerto Rican parade. You see cars going down the street with Puerto Rican flags. They're so happy to be Puerto Rican. But what happened about after the hurricane? Is Puerto Rico, has it been rebuilt that you can celebrate your Puerto Ricanness? And so that's part of this double illusion that we're in. That, when someone puts in a document that's part of the United States government that blacks are beings of inferior order, that has never been rescinded. It's rarely even discussed. That's something that has to be done.
Is it Barashango who wrote the book on European holidays?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The conclusion of his conclusion and the conclusion of others that I have read is that the purpose of holidays is to build group solidarity. It is not just to celebrate, but it is to bond.
Right.
It is to have people recognize their kinship, their lot as being intertwined with a lot of others like themselves. We celebrate the group solidarity of all the other groups because we celebrate their holidays. But yet we are not accepted in the other groups. I don't care that Harold Washington, rode in the St. Patrick parade. He was just an ornament in the parade, not a part of the group. So the whole idea is that we don't, there are some people who still celebrate, say, Garvey Day, There are others who celebrate Kwanzaa, There are other people who celebrate the, what is the Juneteenth?
Right.
Yes. But we don't have holidays for the express purpose of building group solidarity, of knowing that we are all one, knowing that we share the same destiny.
That was one of the essential features of Kemetic society. They had festivals for everything. There wasn't a week that would go by when there wasn't 1 or 2 or 3 days in that week some festival. Festivals for the sun, festivals for the insects, festivals for the cows, festivals for the people, festivals for this and for that, for the netchers, or some would say gods and goddesses, but that's incorrect. They had festivals for everything, festivals for people who excelled in their town, right? They were recognized. Each of these different city-states had festivals. We don't have that, and that was one of the core things that lent itself to solidarity amongst the people, was festivals.
And one of the key principles of Kwanzaa is umoja,
Right.
is unity. You cannot have unity. You have
theme
to
song.
come together before you will be together. And so, you know, I think that the fact that you both have foundations that seek to give guidance so that those of us who want to have some guidance out of what is the matrix you say we're in, will be able to seek it. But I would certainly like to encourage people to want to know, who are we? From whence did we come? Where are we now? What is our destiny? Ask some questions and then seek answers to those questions from some people who have bothered to explore further enough along the road to be able to provide us some answers. We cannot keep behaving
One
as
good thing is our young people really, really want to know. I was with some high school students who are taking advanced placement courses so they can get a jump start in being in college at Chicago State. And just engaging them, I mean, really, really bright students. And then one of them mentioned, oh, that movie Hidden Colors was just something. I said, what? You watched Hidden Colors? She said, oh yeah, I learned so much about ourselves as a people. These were juniors in high school. I said, well, you know, there's 4 other episodes of that. Oh, I gotta get them. So there's young people who really want to know.
Well, somehow we must find a way to connect with those young people. We have 3 minutes, Sebamurti.
I remember many years ago when Camila had volunteered her services at the grammar school around the corner from our house, Edward White, and I was invited in to speak to the kindergartners and the first graders. And I was talking to them on the board about a number of different things, telling them the difference between fact and fiction. And then I started going into nature, and I started talking about history and civilizations. And when I started talking about the stars and the pyramids and all of that, that's when they really started asking a whole lot of questions. And they started wanting to know more about, you would think that at that young of age, they wouldn't want to know or show such excitement and want to know things about the higher realities, but they were inspired and they wanted to know more. You know, what about the star? And what you said that this star was where, and the pyramids was pointing where, and then who did they, was asking a lot of questions. So even at that young age, our children want to know. There's something in them that that innately knows that what they're receiving in the schools is more of an indoctrination. It's not something that's really real knowledge that connects them with that knowing principle in them. But when I started connecting the math and the science and nature and stars and people, there was something that connect in them and made them want to reach out and learn more.
And I had the same experience at Betty Shabazz in sharing about Maat from K through 8th. And I was always amazed, particularly the younger students, first, second grade, even the kindergartners, they were really interested in that. You know, when you tell them M-A-A-T was represented by this woman and an ostrich. And I said, well, why an ostrich feather? I said, well, an ostrich can turn its head all the way around and up and down and can see 360 degrees. And so Ma meant to see. Ma, see. But see with an intention of understanding. And they could pick that up.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and so there is hope.
I'm inspired, and what you're saying to me is that our young people can be inspired.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that is what we need in the schools.
That's
and
what we need in
everywhere else.
schools.
Inspiration.
And in the homes.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere.
Did I thank you while we're still on camera? Thank you, Hunter Havlin,
Thank
Adams
you for
III.
having me.
Thank you, Wane Sebamurti,
Thank you,
Gentry.
Dr. Peace.
This was really good. And